When we did this first work on the collection, cleaning it up and photographing it, the historians worked in the archives and got every story they needed. There's this amazing story about this detonator, which was bought by the Dutch government for 1 million guilders in 1848. It was the first time that the Parliament was resisting this decision and had a research done. That was in the Constitution, had been there for 1 year. This right. In the end, it appeared that this purchase helped the Dutch government out of the weapon race for 3 decades. So it was well spent money. Problem was that the one who offered it claimed to be Louis XVI's grandson, which he wasn't. So when we found this object, it looked like a wheel cap, something you screwed out of a car's wheel, but it appeared to be a thing worth 1 million guilders in those days. And it was there in the shoebox, laying around between all other sort of rubbish. So when it came out that this was this very famous and important thing, that was quite a shock. And these shocks, we encounter them all over this collection, because one thing fits to the other, and the one story took out the other one. So that's how it worked.
Well, tell me now, was there a reason that they built these incredibly beautiful and elaborate models way back in the 18th, 17th century?
Yes, there must have been several reasons. The first of all was because they were pretty. But we have some models which were used as a sort of a proposal shown to the Secretary of State. This is what we can do. Do you want it? So it was a sort of how do you call that? Reclame. Advertisement, yes. Another sort of function is that these models deal with rather complicated ideas. You can make drawings of these ideas, but no one could tell if the Secretary of State was able to read those drawings. So what they did was they hired very skilled model makers, and they made models of the proposals, the propositions. For instance, most of the things here, but there is a lovely model of a toilet used in ships. You could really splash the water through, and it works. Well, that's a very simple thing, but every object here, in fact, was an idea for making things better, work better. So that's how. That's another function of these models. There were also over there is a model that was given by a shipyard after the ship was built as a present, like it still is used today. Several shipyards give as a present a model of the ship to the ship owner, and that was done in the old days as well. But the decoration model is not very well represented here. Most of them are what we call scientific models. And there are very intricate and very clever things in them.
Now, one of the things on that intriguing poster that I see around Amsterdam is in fact what appears to be a submarine by common English vernacular of today. Could you tell us a little about that particular model?
Well, the model is proposed to be the oldest model of an original model of a submarine that was ever made. Of course, there are older submarines, but we don't have original models of them. And the story is that after Van Speyk gave his life in the Belgian War, there was a Dutchman living in Paris who said it wouldn't have been necessary. He could have survived if he would have had a submarine. And he had made a drawing of how the submarine could look like. And he gave this drawing to the man who was in the patents office. And he was also a very high-ranked politician. And this Mr. Lipkens looked at the drawing and said, no, it's rubbish. But coming to look at it, I have a better idea. So he transformed the idea of the submarine into his own idea, and he had someone who helped him, whose name was Olke Uhlenbeck, and he was a diver. He was, by the way, the first diver ever to die of caisson illness, the pressure problems. And this man was very good with his hand because he made this model. And everything is there. There are lorries to bring the ship in balance. There are is a place for 4 people, 4 men who turned the centrifugal pumps. There was even a secret weapon on board. But on second thoughts, Mr. Lipkens thought it too cruel and took it out and took the secret with him into his grave. So the model is still here.
Now, you've presented a lot of models here that seem to have historical significance, and many of them were made at the behest of certain admirals even. I saw one that was absolutely beautiful over here. Were the admirals engaged in model making?
Not exactly in model making, but these were people who were not only fighting on ships. They were interested in everything concerned with sailing. We have had admirals in the 18th century who wrote enormous articles in magazines in which they demanded that the method of building of ships would be modernized and made better, and we should look at the English, and therefore we have some English models here imported here by these admirals, showing this is how we could do it. Why don't we do that? We are no longer ahead like in the 17th century. We are a second grade country. This is we can take this. So they were interested in much more than just sailing ships. And that's how a lot of these things are taken into the Admiralties collection and later in the Navy collection. The Admiralties, Holland used to have 5 Admiralties, so we have 5 different fleets, and they were more or less each other's competitors. So instead of fighting with the enemy, they fought each other, not really as heavily as they did with the enemy, but there were always differences between them. And at the end of the 18th century, when the French came here, it was all over. The Admiralties were put together, and there was one navy. And that's when this collection started.
Now, some of the models that we see here are not full models, but only a half or a quarter or a cut interior. Yeah. What was the purpose of this?
Exactly the same as the other models. There are models only for decorative purposes. There are models as reclame again. What was the word?
Advertisement.
Advertisement again. There were models that were used as when you have a drawing made, it is not always so that this drawing is correct in every way. So you could check the drawing by making a half model to see if the lines were all good and fitting. That is another purpose. There's even one model which was used to make a ship's drawing, because it was built up from different blocks, put together, shaped, taken apart, and the lines were drawn around them. So that was one method of designing ships, very primitive of course, but it was a method.
I once read something about the Tsar of Russia, or the future Tsar. He came first to Holland to study shipbuilding and decided it was
ended up in England.
Unsatisfactory and went to England. What was the deal with that? Do you know anything about that?
Well, it has often been used, this story, to show how badly we did build ships in those days. It's completely wrong. People forget that the Tsar came to Holland in the first place. So there was nothing wrong with the ships. But what this Tsar was after was he wanted to have a system which he could introduce into his own country. Now the Dutch built in a traditional way, and they had nothing on paper. When a shipbuilder had the size, the length of his ship, he knew what the beam would have to be, how deep the hold would have to be, because that is all in ratio, all in formulas. Now, what you can only learn this traditional way of building by taking part of it. And I must say, I admire this Tsar very much because he did take part of it. And he stayed here for half a year and he tried to manage to take over this system of formulas. He didn't succeed because it was logical. Every shipbuilder here had a training of maybe 20 to 25 years before he was able to build ships of his own. So even the Tsar couldn't learn that in half a year, and he found out in time. So he went to England, and in England they were already building from ship's drawings. So the only thing he had to do is to import drawings of every charter ship. There were lists added to it with the sizes of all wood parts. So there was more or less a prescription how to make a ship. That was what he was after. But those ships were not much better than the Dutch ships.
Well, Ab, it's a beautiful collection. I wish you a lot of success with it, and thank you for being with us today.
Okay, very welcome.